Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Postgame Show. And what an evening it was. I am Zach Ewing, live here from the head coach's suite, from Brian Kelly's suite at Tiger Stadium. Just a few minutes ago, that field was completely full of Tiger fans, and our postgame show got relocated as a result. But we're glad you could join us. We're glad that you could tune in for just a most memorable night for LSU. They defeat Ole Miss 29-26 in overtime. As it says on the graphic, their only lead of the game came on the final play of the game. 25-yard touchdown pass on the first offensive play of overtime for LSU. Garrett Nussmeier to Kyron Lacey. Defensive back slipped, kind of fell down. Lacey just had to stand there and make one of the easier catches of the night. It was not an easy night for LSU. It was a dramatic night. Their defense had to play very well, bend but don't break. Garrett Nussmeier threw a whole bunch of incompletions, dangerous throws, but in the end, LSU gets the win. LSU moves to 5-1. They're 2-0 in the SEC. They remain one of just 3 undefeated teams in the SEC. And maybe most sweet of all, maybe not most sweet of all, but to add to the sweetness of the occasion for LSU fans, they knock Ole Miss down to 4-2 and probably just about eliminate the Rebels from the college football playoff conversation. Ole Miss, a team that everybody thought was going to be in that conversation. If they reeled off 6 straight wins to end the season, they might still get in it at 10-2, but really put their rivals on the brink. LSU 5-1. They're the team in control of their own destiny now, and they go on to a pretty difficult road trip coming up for the next 2 weeks at Arkansas next Saturday, at Texas A&M in 2 weeks in College Station. So we'll talk a lot about that. We're also going to have visits from our beat writers. Koki Riley, I think, is going to stop by. He was down taking some photos of the craziness on the field and some video and stuff. Wilson Alexander will try to stop by, as well as our columnist, Scott Rabalais. Our LSU Insider Postgame Show is brought to you by Waste Pro. And look, we've got lots of stuff to talk to. I know it's late, but leave your comments. We want you to be a part of the show and tell us what you thought of LSU's win. Ask your questions, and we will get to them as we can over the next, probably not going to go too late tonight, but maybe the next 30 minutes or so. So once again, LSU beats Ole Miss 26-23. Just crazy, crazy dramatic night. We'll start by kind of going through how it all happened. If you can believe it, the first quarter of this game was scoreless. If you can remember, about 50 years ago. How do LSU fans do it, by the way? Do you lose all your hair by age 40, or I just don't totally understand how you put up with all this drama. The last time LSU was an underdog on this field was 2 years ago against Alabama, and they won with a touchdown to Mason Taylor in the same end zone, in the same corner of the end zone. And that one, I think, was a 2-point conversion, actually. Mason Taylor won that game for LSU, but this was the same corner of the end zone. Kyron Lacey wins it tonight against Ole Miss after Ole Miss had kicked a 57-yard field goal in their half of overtime. They went backward because of penalties and ended up kind of getting saved by their kicker, Caden Davis, who makes a 57-yard field goal and puts the Rebels up 26-23. But then the touchdown gives LSU the lead. And as I mentioned, as we kind of go through this, Ole Miss was in the lead. I won't say in control, but they were in the lead of this game basically the entire time. It was scoreless at the end of a quarter. They took a 3-0 lead on the first play of the second quarter. That was Caden Davis, 49-yard field goal. It was just a few minutes later that Ulysses Bentley, on a 4th-and-1 play, busts a 50-yard touchdown run. LSU missed a couple of tackles. He broke a tackle, and all of a sudden he's off to the races with everybody close to the line defending the 4th-and-1. So that made it 10-0. And I don't want to say it looked like it was going to be an Ole Miss rout, but LSU had to answer, and they did. They had their best drive. I really think their best drive of the whole game. Right after that, I guess you could argue the final drive of the game was right up there too. But LSU went 75 yards in 6 plays, but the last 61 of them came in just 3 plays. They had a long pass to Aaron Anderson, another Kyron Lacey, and then a 12-yard touchdown pass from Garrett Nussmeier to Trey'Dez Green. That made it 10-7. Second quarter was just getting going at that point. Trey Harris, a 15-yard touchdown reception from Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss quarterback, with 1:42 left in the second quarter. That extended the Ole Miss lead to 17-7. LSU goes down, gets a field goal from Damian Ramos with 34 seconds left to make it 17-10. And then key moment here, with just 34 seconds left, Ole Miss did have a couple of timeouts, and Lane Kiffin, always very aggressive, tries to get some more points before halftime. Instead, Ole Miss loses a fumble, gives it back to LSU. LSU cashed that into another Damian Ramos field goal. And so you go from 17-7 to 17-13 at halftime. And, that kind of kept LSU in the game. Now, having said that, teams just traded field goals in the fourth quarter. So it's 20-16 Ole Miss. Caden Davis hits another one with 3 minutes and 14 seconds left in the game. It was just a battle of field goals in the second half to make it 23-16 and basically set up last chance saloon for the Tigers. With 3:14 left, they had 2 timeouts. They go 75 yards, kind of methodical drive, even though it was in like a 3-minute drill. It was still pretty methodical, a couple of big plays, lots of reviews, the 2-minute warning timeouts. I mean, the thing took like 30 minutes. And LSU finally does get the touchdown to tie the game. Aaron Anderson, a 23-yard pass from Garrett Nussmeier. It came on 4th and 5 from the Ole Miss 23, just completely dramatic. Pour one out for Ole Miss fans tonight. I know you don't want to hear that, but what a heartbreaking loss for them. They're one play away from winning, and a 4th and 5, 23-yard touchdown pass to Aaron Anderson. Thought Brian Kelly might consider going for 2 in the win right then and there. Instead, he kicks the extra point. Guess you go for the tie at home. That tied the game 23-23. We do indeed go to overtime. And as I mentioned, Caden Davis, the 57-yard field goal in overtime after Ole Miss went backward because of penalties, and LSU answers with a touchdown. Garrett Nussmeier to Kyron Lacey, 29-26 the final. That's kind of a unique score, and it is one that I think will live in LSU lore for a long time. Still have not lost to Ole Miss at home since 2008. Still have control of your destiny. Still kind of keep Ole Miss as being the little brother, and keep those national championship, those college football playoff hopes alive, at least for another week. LSU going to Fayetteville, Arkansas next week to face the Razorbacks, who had a bye this week and are coming off their own big win. They beat Tennessee at home last week. Get the bye week to enjoy that, and then they welcome LSU into Razorback Stadium there in Fayetteville next Saturday. So the beat goes on, but it's a lot more exciting to go on as a winner than it is as a loser. So tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. We'll hear just 30-second word from our sponsor, Waste Pro, and we'll be right back on the LSU Sports Insider postgame show.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
Few minutes. Okay. All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider postgame show. Zach Ewing live here, joined now by Scott Rabalais. Scott, pick up that mic right there. We're doing this on the fly here in Brian Kelly's suite.
We are indeed.
You can't even see the top of Scott's head.
I'll do this.
Your hair's never looked better. Reb, just as I was saying before the break, a dramatic night here in Tiger Stadium. I mean, it seems like every year we get one of these, but it's just a game LSU fans will probably never forget.
Zach, I've covered more LSU games than I care to count probably at this point, and there's just been so many epic games with Ole Miss over the years, and it's Ole Miss has won a few, but it's usually LSU winning in this series, and this is going to rank with a lot of those great wins. I mean, there's the Billy Cannon run back in '59, and Bert Jones pass to Brad Davis in 1972, and a handful of other games. But I mean, overtime, 29-26, when you're down the whole game and you come back to win, and it's kind of now you have a game that it's kind of a pre-playoff atmosphere. It was an epic win for LSU, and one that could have gone either way. And I think they kind of stole one a little bit tonight. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, Ole Miss kind of kept them in the game. Some penalties in key situations, the fumble before halftime that gives LSU a field goal. And then late in regulation, LSU kind of, like, as I was saying, the most methodical 2-minute drive you ever see at the end of the game with timeouts and reviews and kind of stops and starts. And then finally the 4th down touchdown pass to Aaron Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like LSU made the plays, and then they'd say, no, wait, something happened. We got to put the ball back here, or no, that wasn't a good play. And and then the fourth down, and Nussmeier, who has always seemed like throughout the night was just a little bit off a lot of times, a little bit off with his passes, maybe not making the best decisions, but he threw a brilliant pass to Anderson in the end zone, just past the outstretched arm of the Ole Miss defender at the front of the end zone. And they made it, they decided to go for the extra point. Unlike the Alabama game 2 years ago, they decided to kick and go play for overtime. And then I tweeted just before LSU took possession, I said, Nick Saban made a habit at LSU of going for it all. And at Alabama too, but going for it all in overtime very quickly. And they did. Your first play took a shot right in the end zone. Aaron Anderson probably got away with a little push off. Cameron Lacey probably got away with a push off a little bit there, but they're not going to call that in that situation. And LSU comes away with the win after holding Ole Miss to the field goal. So, but they trailed all game. They trailed
literally the entire game.
Literally, that was LSU's first lead of the game. Was that touchdown catch in overtime? So this was. That's what made it even more epic. And look, and this is like I said, kind of a pre-playoff atmosphere. This is supposed to be Ole Miss's year. They got all these players to come back. They had all these transfers. They went to the portal and got all these players, and now they got 2 losses, and it's like it's going to be a very tough.
Even
slog.
If you run the table, you're not guaranteed to be in.
Right.
I mean, I know LSU fans don't want to hear that tonight. They'd rather just lord it over Ole Miss. But this is a tough night for Ole Miss, man. They really let this one get away.
They did, but I certainly don't want to sound like a fan. But the Rebels they're kind of used to this against LSU. No, it's true. I mean, over the last 65 years, Billy Cannon's punt return in 1959, Burt Jones to Brad Davis in 1972, huge rally in 1984 when I was a freshman at LSU, watching the game from the student section. The game when Ole Miss came in here number 3 10 years ago, and Ronald Martin intercepted a Bo Wallace pass in the end zone, and again the game LSU wins 10-7. That's when Les Miles said, "Tiger Stadium is where the opponent's dreams come to die," and once again, the opponent's dreams came to die tonight for Ole Miss, and LSU stormed the field. We figure it's going to cost them about $250,000, but I think Scott Woodward might transfer those funds with a bit of a smile on his face, as much as you can when you part with $250,000.
We saw it happen twice in the SEC last week at Arkansas and at Vanderbilt field rushes, and look, you're not going to stop them from doing it. The schools will pay the fine; they'll take it because it means they're winning, and that's worth a lot more. I was just looking at the stats, and you mentioned, LSU kind of got away with one. They couldn't run the ball tonight, Scott. I mean, it was like, I'm looking at the final numbers, but they did finish with 84 yards rushing, but only 3.5 per carry. Garrett Nussmeier threw 51 passes.
Yeah, it's not the kind of game plan you would have wanted or would have thought that they would employ to have a winning effort. You take away Nussmeier's 14-yard scramble, which was their longest run of the night. The running backs averaged 3.0 per carry. So it wasn't a very effective night. Ole Miss, their defensive front was what you expected. But then again, this has certainly been a pattern for LSU this season. Trouble opening some running holes and running lanes, but yet they did a good job of protecting Nussmeier. He had to scramble around a few times, but he wasn't sacked, and he did a lot of times have time to throw. And again, some of his throws were a little off, but he made the big throws when he had to, converting a couple of fourth downs on that last drive of regulation, and then of course hitting the big pass to Lacey in overtime.
Watching the LSU Sports Insider postgame show for LSU Ole Miss. The Tigers win it 29-26. Zach Ewing visiting with Scott Rabalais. Let's leave with this, Scott. Where does this leave the Tigers going forward? I mean, obviously they're still not a perfect team, but boy, you're halfway through the season now. 5-1, tough road trip coming up to Arkansas and Texas A&M. Just kind of staying alive at this point.
Staying alive, in the periphery, obviously the USC loss to open the season put them in a bind, as have these other season opening losses in recent years. But they've won 5 straight now. But this was the start of a very tough season defining, you would think, 4-game stretch, because now you go to Arkansas and Texas A&M back to back, then you come home to play Alabama, which looks Jekyll and Hyde-ish, I think could be fair to say for Alabama. Maybe even a game that you're kind of thinking at the moment, well, maybe that's an easier game to win for LSU than this Ole Miss game was. Maybe there's a little better matchup for LSU. So the Tigers, I think when the polls come out tomorrow, when voters like our Koki Riley might be forced to persuaded to put LSU in their top 10. Not putting any pressure on Koki at all. He's got to vote his conscience. But LSU was 13, and so they're in the hunt. They're in the hunt. They're getting better a little bit. And look, I started to write before this game ended, when it looked like LSU might lose, 23-16 or something like that. who would have thought after last year's game against Ole Miss that it would be the offense that kind of let them down? The defense, I thought, they gave up some big plays and some chunk plays and some long gains to Ole Miss, to Jackson Dart, to Trey Harris, who's an excellent receiver, as good as advertised, the kid from Lafayette. But they only allowed 26 points in overtime. I would have thought that happened before the game. 23 in regulation, that'd be enough for LSU to go ahead and win outright. So I thought that they did pretty good. They're making some progress, and certainly they're getting a lot of pressure up front with the guys like Swinson, and then Whit Weeks had.
I'm glad you mentioned that. He had 18 tackles,
18 tackles,
10 solos,
career high. So they're making some progress
for the team. Success, and you mentioned the schedule, Rab. I'm glad you brought it up, but Alabama maybe looks a little bit easier, but then at Florida, at Vanderbilt, or at Florida home versus Vanderbilt, all of a sudden look a little trickier than maybe they did at the beginning of the season. Like, no, I wouldn't say there's an easy game left on LSU schedule.
No, certainly not. 6 games, all of them could go either way, and I think it would be kind of folly to think that they're all going to go LSU's way, but they're not going to be out of any game. There's not a game that they can't win, and but you just have to take it week by week with this team and see how far they can get. And it's fascinating to watch. Obviously, this was a huge one, but there are a lot of huge ones left, and we'll see how far they can go.
All right, we're going to say goodnight to Scott Rabalais. We'll take one more 30-second break here from Waste Pro, and then Koki Riley is here, and he will be with us right after this.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider postgame show. Now with LSU advocate LSU beat writer Koki Riley, also squeezing in here in the camera frame. We'll get better at this if we do. We may do it from the suite again. It's a little more convenient up here.
Yeah, and it's nice up here. There's space, and no one's like walking in the background making faces. Like,
thanks to Brian
nice.
Kelly for letting us borrow his suite. We didn't ask. But thank you, BK. All right, Koki. I kind of look at this two ways, and I think you could say, did Ole Miss lose this game or did LSU win this game? I think Ole Miss kind of left the door open, but LSU came barging through.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. I think both these teams had opportunities to take the lead or win this game much earlier, but I think it was a lot of missed opportunities and for both sides. And I think at the end of the day, Ole Miss had just one too many missed opportunities in this game. And I think LSU won this game. Brian Kelly just said after his press conference that during his press conference, I should say, that LSU won this game because of its offensive line and the way it was able to pass protect despite being in a lot of obvious passing situations. But to be honest, I thought it was the defensive line and the amount of pressure they were able to get on Jackson Dart and force them behind the sticks through that pressure. I think that's why they won this game. Obviously they tackled pretty well for the most part all night. I thought they did a good job. Zai Alexander had a fantastic game. He actually ended up getting the game ball tonight. That's what Brian Kelly said after the game. But I still think at the end of the day, it was Braden Swinson, it was Whit Weeks, it was that front seven, consistently creating havoc in the backfield. And I think that's what won in this game in the end.
Yeah, I mean, if LSU did not suffer a single sack, Garrett Nussmeier was not sacked, and they got Jackson Dart 6 times. That's a huge difference in a game like this, where you're putting a team behind the sticks. I didn't see the penalty numbers. It seemed like Ole Miss really suffered in penalties too at key times. Let's see. Yeah, Ole Miss 12 penalties for 110 yards.
Wow.
LSU had 6 penalties for 45 yards. So a big difference there. Each team had the 2 turnovers. Ole Miss ran the ball better, but it was just one of those games. LSU came up with a play every time they needed one.
I think Ole Miss ran the ball better in this game because LSU didn't run the ball well at all. And I think Ole Miss had a couple chunk plays on the ground, obviously, but I think LSU did a decent job of not making the running game a problem for them, because it never felt like Ole Miss was just getting first down after first down on the run. There wasn't a lot of consistency with that rushing attack. It was more consistent than LSU's rushing attack, but it wasn't to the point where it negated their pass rush, right? And again, it was that pass rush that I honestly think that was the real key for them in this game as to why they won it. I mean, I thought Braden Switzer was excellent. They were able to pressure dart with 4. They had a lot of creative blitzes and a lot of 3rd and long situations. Brian Kelly also said after the game that, because of that pass rush and the amount of pressure they were able to create with guys like Weeks and Swinson, they were able to mix up some looks on some of those 3rd and longs that actually ended up forcing LSU to forcing Ole Miss to call a couple timeouts. So yeah,
you're gonna get a live look at how they close the windows in the suites in the press box here at Tiger Stadium. So that'll be cool. We may need to move out of the way for a second. Actually, let's see how talented these guys are behind us. But Koki, LSU, I look. Garrett Nussmeier is never going to be Jaden Daniels. He's not mobile like that. He's not going to go run for 100-plus yards every game. He is showing that he's mobile enough to escape pocket pressure, to kind of feel his way through the pocket. We saw that over and over again in the fourth quarter. He's just buying himself time and then firing kind of off platform to one of his receivers, and he made a lot of plays that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Brian Kelly called this a growth game for Garrett Nussmeier tonight, and the fact that and it made sense that those comments made sense, because as the game went along, he sort of figured out how to, I guess, be more effective in these 3rd and long obvious passing situations, right? When they didn't have a running game going at all and they were stuck in constant 3rd and 10s, 2nd and 10s, and they were able to convert a lot of those plays, and they at least convert enough of them to win the game, because Nussmeier was just able to read the field better. He showed better patience. If you notice, and he was also able to extend plays with his legs a little bit, like get out of the pocket and make some of those off-platform throws that you were just talking about. So he improved as the game went along, because at first I really didn't think a lot of those incompletions were his fault. I think LSU was just had no separation on the outside. Then as the game wore along, they did a much better job of getting separation, but Nussmeier wasn't hitting throws. He was forcing balls into spots. And you really sort of felt the effects of being forced into those 2nd and 3rd and longs, something that, we've talked about a million, or at least I feel like I've talked about a million times on podcasts and radio shows, about how if there's going to be a kryptonite to this LSU defense, it's that the running game doesn't get them into favorable down and distances. They become too predictable in passing down situations. They're stuck in 2nd and 3rd and longs, and Garrett Nussmeier starts forcing plays. And this is a strong passing unit, and you saw that at the end of the game tonight. But there were a lot of times, I'd say the vast majority of the game, where they struggled, and it was for those exact reasons. And they need to be able to sort of, if you want areas of improvement for LSU, it's definitely, they need to be able to get themselves into more favorable down and distance situations, whether it's in the running game or the screen game, just something that doesn't force them into these obvious passing downs.
Yeah. I mean, if you had told me just these two stats, and I'm cherry picking the stats here, but the team's leading rushers, Caden Durham, 12 carries, 37 yards. And for Ole Miss, it was Ulysses Bentley, 11 carries, 107 yards, and that 50-yard touchdown. You just told me those two stats, I would have said Ole Miss wins by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you told me that LSU would shut out Ole Miss in the first quarter, I would have said, wow, they must be up like 14-0 or something to start the game.
Either team, yeah.
Yeah, for either team. And it was a wild game. And it's interesting because, like, for all the reasons that I just said, that would, like, the formula to stop this LSU offense happened in this game. Mm-hmm. And yet they were still able to win this game because of their defense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a team showing that it can find different ways to win. It's another Brian Kelly team that's getting better as the season goes on. No, you don't want to keep losing the season opener, but they're putting themselves in a good place. So let's talk going forward. This road trip, and then you follow it up with the home game against Alabama. So these next 3 weeks before LSU's second bye week, or not bye weeks before
Alabama. Bye weeks before Alabama.
So let's just focus on the road trip. This is really season defining. If they can find a way to sweep this road trip, they're going to go into November with not only a chance to make the college football playoff, but you're looking at 3 home games and the one road trip to Florida, who looks better than they did at the beginning of the season. But you'd certainly, I think at the beginning of the season, have taken 7-1 going into that spot, beating Ole Miss, beating a Texas A&M team that looks like it's maybe top 10, top 15 quality as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I put Texas A&M at number 7 on my poll this past week, and I got a lot of flack for that. But at the same time, I really believe if you look at their resume and you look at how good their defense has been playing this season and some of the promising signs you saw offensively against Missouri this past week, you're looking at a team that's extremely dangerous, and you're going to have to go on the road in Kyle Field, and it's not going to be easy for them. It's just not going to be easy. That you could argue that could be their toughest game this season, especially with the way Alabama's looked lately. So I really think like these next 2 games are absolutely huge, and obviously you can't overlook Arkansas. I mean, they beat Tennessee last week, so it's the SEC, man. It's tough every week.
I mean, there's no rest, and it kind of is one of those years, and we can talk about this too. The SEC today was just again another insane day. Alabama just tries to give the game away against South Carolina and somehow hangs on to win 27-25. And then you had, Texas just looks like they're better than everybody.
Yeah.
They beat the brains.
But LSU doesn't play them this season. So
yeah, at least not until Atlanta.
Yeah. If they get there, they think they're Atlanta first. Yeah.
And then Tennessee really has to hang. They have to come back and then hang on as Florida forces overtime and Tennessee wins in overtime there in Knoxville. It's kind of one of those years where nobody looks really good. Georgia only, just kind of unimpressively beats Mississippi State, but nobody's that bad either. Mississippi State is probably the worst team in the conference, and they go to Georgia and hang within 10 points of the Bulldogs. So it's one of those years where everybody just kind of throw them in a hat and see what comes out.
And Vanderbilt beat Kentucky. So
that's right.
The Vandy train continues.
2-1 in the SEC now.
Yeah, exactly. And, LSU, they're undefeated in the SEC, and still – it doesn't feel like it, but they still are. And it's they had to have this, and they got it. And I mean, now the pressure only ramps up as we go into the further into the season. So it's going to be really fascinating. And if they can, fix some of these running game woes, and I think part of it's still what we've talked about before. And when anytime it looks like they're going to hand off the ball, defenses know immediately to just crash the line of scrimmage, and you can just feel that there's going to be no holes available because the linebackers are just snap on command. They're just heading down the line of scrimmage, and it's just harder to open up those holes. And Caden Durham tried to bounce out a couple plays, but Ole Miss did a good job of tackling a lot of those plays out in space. And it's going to be tough for them to try to figure out how to make this run game a little bit more unpredictable.
Yeah, it was a weird game because it was nothing like last year's 55-49 game in Oxford. But in some ways, the teams did go up and down the field. But each team attempted 5 field goals. Both defenses got really good once you got inside the 30. Both, I think, made 4, missed 1. And in that respect, I mean, that's where I think if you look at the improvement LSU's defense has made under Blake Baker. We talked about the line of scrimmage with Rab, the 6 sacks. Whit Weeks is obviously playing out of his mind. Mm-hmm. But they found a way, and the penalties are part of it. Ole Miss had 110 yards in penalties.
Yeah.
I wonder, I'd be curious to see if Lane Kiffin talked about that in his press conference or if he was asked about it. But they did find a way to come up with big plays in the red zone, and really not just the red zone, but inside the 40.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And you got to give a shout out to Zy Alexander again. Like they got good play in the secondary. They got the best play in the secondary they've had in 2 years, probably. I mean, it was there were some busts, especially early in the game, but I thought Ashton Stamps had a solid game, had some nice tackles, and I thought Zy Alexander was beyond exceptional. This was pretty easily his best game as a Tiger, and I think I think LSU fans should feel much better about at least one of the cornerback spots moving forward. And I don't know if they have safety fully figured out. I think Sage Ryan made a couple mistakes in this game, but Jordan Gilbert had one bad missed tackle, but I thought he was okay. But it definitely seemed like they shortened the rotation at corner. Occasionally PJ Woodland was out there, but they really stuck to those 2 on the outside, and they stuck to the 2 safeties for the most part too. I think Deshaun McBride was in there briefly. Deshaun Spears, I should say. Sorry, was in there briefly, but he came out of the game, I think, after one of the big plays in the first half. So they shortened the rotation in the secondary, and they rotated a lot of guys in that front 7 still, and they got a lot of productivity out of a lot of different guys. And even if Swinson and Weeks were obviously the highlights there.
Yeah. You're watching the LSU Sports Insider post-game show here on the LSU Sports on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up. All of that good stuff. Tell your friends. We know it's getting late. The clock just struck midnight, so say this. We'll give about another 5 minutes and see if Wilson Alexander or Reed Darcy can get off of their deadline duties and join us. But until then, Koki, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. You're a voter in the AP poll.
Yes.
What is your process, particularly after having to cover a game that ends after 11 o'clock at night? I don't assume you got to see a lot of Oregon's win over Ohio State.
No. Saw the very end. And
maybe a couple of plays. Same thing, even with some of the games that were this afternoon, they're ending as we're getting ready to cover this game at Tiger Stadium. So what's your process when you go home tonight? How much do you look at results? Can you watch highlights? I mean, what do you do?
You look at results and you pull up. So stat broadcast is kind of a live game feed of the stats that a lot of the journalists use, and you can go back and access them after the fact. And I like to sort of look through the more in-depth stats and just sort of see as quickly as I can, as efficiently as I can, and as thoroughly as I can what happened in a lot of these games. Maybe not every single game, or else I'd be up all night. But I'm up pretty late when I'm doing this. But either way, like it's very important to just try to be as thorough and efficient as possible. And I try to look at as many different stats as possible. Sometimes if I'm really confused, I'll go back and just try to find the game highlights. And then you also have to put in the resume of what these teams have done already and what these teams look like that now as we're 7 weeks into the season. So for LSU, like this Ole Miss win is a huge win. It keeps them in the college football playoff discussion. It's the biggest one they've had this season.
You knew what I was going to ask you. I'm going to ask you where you're putting LSU.
Yeah.
You're not going to know exactly yet, but ballpark, they were 13th in the AP poll. They were actually 9th in the coaches poll coming into this week. I'm going to guess probably the range they end up in the overall AP poll. But as a voter, where did you have them last week?
I had them at 12.
Okay.
So I'm hard pressed to see them not in the top 10 after this, especially Ole Miss was ahead of them. They're going to jump Ole Miss. I think it's pretty safe to say, because if you look at the Ole Miss resume now,
they have to. I mean,
there's no really impressive wins there. And there's 2 very disappointing performances and 2 disappointing losses.
Yep.
And really your only case for Ole Miss is that they're great on paper. And we thought about that at the very, very beginning of the year.
We're looking at the poll here just so we can. Tennessee has to go to overtime. Do you consider putting LSU over them? I believe Iowa State hung on to beat West Virginia.
If you look at Tennessee's resume, it's not terribly impressive, especially with the way Oklahoma has looked lately.
Yep,
I think there's a good case. I don't want to put myself into a corner here too much that you could put them over them. So I have trouble seeing LSU not being in the top 10 after this week in general, regardless of what I do. But for me personally, I have trouble not seeing myself not put them in the top. Like, I think they're a top 10 team after this week. It's
what
hard.
About LSU versus Alabama, because Alabama has the win over Georgia.
Yeah.
But I would say LSU's win over Ole Miss is at least close to that. Maybe not quite that good. But Alabama has, the really bad loss to Vanderbilt.
The worst loss. They both played close games
honestly,
against South Carolina.
Vandy versus USC may be a closer argument than we're giving it credit for.
That's true. It may be, but USC almost beat Penn State this week, and everyone had Penn State in their top 5. So, this is what makes being an AP poll voter very hard. I think and that's just like a small insert into the millions of different decisions and takes you have to have in order to properly try to rank the teams. There's no right answers. And, it's a living document. Sometimes you just have to accept the fact that it's a living document and just take it face value for what you have at the moment.
And I think, the good news with that one is that LSU and Alabama are going to play here in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We'll get the answer to that question. And in the meantime, by the way, we talked about LSU going to Arkansas and Texas A&M the next 2 weeks. Alabama goes to Tennessee next week and then plays Missouri at home. Like, the chance of these 2 teams still each only having 1 loss when they meet here on November 9th is pretty slim.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be another, quote unquote elimination game for the playoff. That game here, that might really be an elimination game. I think a lot of people, at least in the national media, were talking about how this was a quasi elimination game for the playoff, because the loser of this game has 2 losses and the rest of the SEC schedule to go. Like, for Ole Miss, now that they have 2 losses, they're going to have to beat Georgia if they want a chance of making the playoff.
Yeah.
And that's just a very tall task, especially with the way this team has looked so far this season. So I think that may be another one of those sort of games where one, if not both those teams may have 2 losses, and we could be looking at, another, playing game for the playoff here in Tiger Stadium. But The Alabama schedule is not easy. That's why that Vanderbilt loss was so big.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Because of all those games that you just relayed off, because then they play LSU.
Right. Right. and on LSU side, I mean, we'll talk about this on the LSU Insider podcast this week, but Arkansas is not an easy game.
No.
Texas A&M might be their most difficult game now.
Yeah,
if we
that might be
recalibrate the schedule halfway through,
that might be tougher than the Tennessee game that we just talked about that Alabama has to face.
You're talking about on the road in College Station. I know A&M lost to Notre Dame to start the year in a close game. They have done nothing but win since they pulverized Missouri there last week, and now they, we'll see what they come up with next week. But if LSU can beat Arkansas, they go to A&M. That sets up a huge game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, the 12-team playoff makes all this kind of possible, because not saying that this game would mean nothing. It clearly would have meant something in a 14 playoff era, and LSU would still be alive for a 14 playoff. But you're talking about, like, you're having to run the table and you're needing a bunch of help. And, they got like a 2% chance of making it. Now you're talking about, I don't know if it's 50-50, but it's up there.
Their odds are much higher now after they win this game, because it gives them a cushion, right? It doesn't mean that A&M game, you want to win it, but if you don't win it, it's not the absolute end of the world, because then the Alabama game is a must win,
if you
right?
go 2-1 over the next 3 weeks, you will then, or next 3 games, you will then go into the final 3 games still in the conversation. And that's all you can ask for.
Exactly. And if you lose this game, you don't have that cushion anymore, and that's just such a big thing. You needed that cushion going into these next 3 games, and now you have that little cushion.
All right. I don't think we're going to get to Wilson or Reed unless they come through that door in the next 30 seconds, because it's getting late. I know a lot of y'all need to get to bed. I got to get to New Orleans in the morning for the Saints and Bucks game. So I think we're going to call it a show. Patrick McGee produced for us tonight, so we appreciate him. We appreciate all of you. And he's Koki Riley. Our thanks to Scott Rabalais for stopping by. This is the LSU Sports Insider Postgame Show. It's brought to you by Waste Pro. I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll wish everybody a good night.